What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jordan and today we're working on the Datsun 280Z, and unfortunately I have some damage on the front carbon fiber lip. So I did some research and I think I can repair it without having to replace the whole piece. So stick around if you want to see what I do and how it turns out. So unfortunately I did just barely hit a speed bump and it grazed my front carbon fiber lip on the top of it, and I got a few chips and scratches and things on the front of the lip. But because it's just a small superficial, blemish on the front of the car, I don't really feel the need to fully replace an expensive carbon fiber part, which I think is probably pretty similar to a lot of the things that you guys have in your car if you have a lowered car and maybe you've hit one of those things at the front of a parking space or scraped it on your driveway. So I'm gonna show you guys what I bought to try and fix this, this repair, and then we'll go over everything in detail. So let's check out what I got. Now, a lot of the things that I'm gonna use for this repair can probably be found around your house. We have some sandpaper. There's a variety pack that comes from anywhere from 150 to 3,000 grit. You're gonna wanna go up to 2,000 grit to get a really nice finish on your carbon fiber before polishing. I got a sanding block to help save my fingertips. I have some plastic and things to protect our work area because if you get epoxy on the floor, it's not gonna come off. So this is gonna help us just be clean. The star of the show is gonna be your 5-minute epoxy from DevCon. And this is a really great product just because it's clear. It's really clear, and I think it's gonna work really well for this application. It also comes with a mixing tip. That way there's no containers and no hardeners and resin and all this stuff. It's just super easy, plug and play, squeeze it out and start repairing. Then I got some paint brushes to apply the resin and some little dishes here that you can get at like Chipotle or something. I'm just gonna put some resin on there to help us dab it into the repaired areas. And I'm gonna put all of this, I'm gonna put this, and this all on the links down below in the description. That way you can follow along with me and buy it on Amazon. So let's go over to the car and see what damage we're working with. So as you can see here, the damage to the carbon fiber lip is really minimal, but it doesn't matter whether you're working with something this small or if you're working with something a little bit bigger, a little bit more serious, the same principles apply. See all these little white spots here or lighter spots? This is where the epoxy has lifted up past the weave, and that's basically like an air gap. And so with all carbon fiber repairs, what you need to do is you need to chip away at that resin that is no longer attached to the weave and expose the bare weave, because we're going to replace that detached resin with the new resin. Because if you just take some of this resin we have and kind of like shove it in here and kind of just mush it on there, you're still going to be left with these air gaps. So that may make it a little bit more structurally sound because you've applied resin over it to make it stronger, but it's not going to be aesthetically pleasing. So if I want to repair all these little annoying chips and stuff, basically what you have to do is either have to chip off the delaminated resin, or you just have to sand it down to the weave. What you have to be careful of though is that if you get down to the weave and you start messing up the weave, it will be visible in your repair. So just keep that in mind, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use an X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to be chipping away at this resin that is no longer attached, and basically just making a cavity for us to put that resin in there. All right, so after carefully going in and kind of chipping away at these little air pockets, it's not necessarily looking better. It might actually look a little bit worse, but we're gonna be sanding it and putting resin on there, so just trust the process. So next I have some 320 grit sandpaper that I just put on my little sanding block, and I'm just gonna lightly rough it up and try and smooth down some of the edges, and then we'll move on to the next step. what's amazing is that with a little wipe down of some isopropyl alcohol, it already looks so much better. So this kind of gives us a little preview, is that once you put the epoxy on there, this is a little bit of what it might look like. Make sure to clean it up real good. You don't want to have any resin dust stuck in the crevices, because those are going to make white spots in your repair. So now we're finally on to the point of epoxy. So here's our little epoxy guy, really awesome product here. All you got to do is just push this guy out, pop it out of the center, and then we got to break off the tip. I'm going to break that off in a second. Then you have to twist this guy on fully, and then I'm just going to squeeze the epoxy onto our little dish here. And my strategy for this first laydown of epoxy is I'm going to take just a tiny little brush, and my goal is to get the epoxy as far into all those little crevices as possible. So the first round I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and shove all the epoxy into these little air pockets, and hopefully it kind of gets rid of any of the whiteness in the chips, and really just kind of get it into all the little crevices. And then after I do that, my next round is I'm going to try and go a little bit heavier on the epoxy, and I'm going to kind of do like a smooth lay down, and hopefully we filled in all those low spots. But you know, I might need to do this step 2 or 3 times after it's gotten tacky. So what's good is that this product comes with 2 tips. So basically we can do this 2 times around, and hopefully that is enough just to use one little syringe. Alright, so it was a little bit hectic with the timing, and I was having some issues with this thing initially, but it seemed to work really well. I just kind of like brushed it on. It's a little bit goopier, a little bit thicker than a typical paint is, so it's actually kind of easy to kind of shape to the contours of the piece. But then, you know, we're gonna sand it down anyway, so I'm gonna let it dry, do its thing, and then we'll check on it in a few minutes. Alright, so I've let this cure for about 15 minutes now, and it's all nice and hardened. And if you look closely, you can see where the high spots are and where the low spots are. This would be all the newly added epoxy, and then the original epoxy right there. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to level all of that out. We're going to try and get rid of the high spots, and we're going to do that with wet sanding. So I'm just going to use my 360 grit again, and a wet towel, and try and keep it wet as I sand it. And the goal here is to smooth out all the high spots and see if we need to add any more epoxy for any leftover low spots. So let's get to it. Well guys, I think it turned out pretty dang good. You can see where the epoxy had filled in all the little chips, and now we're going into the original epoxy. So I'm just gonna wipe this down so you can see what it's gonna look like when it's done. Pretty amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and start refining this with finer and finer sandpapers all the way up to 2000 grit. I'm not going to record that because it's just a bunch of sanding. So I will be right back, and then we're going to go on to the final step, which is polish. Alright, so 2000 grit is done, and you can see just where the 2000 grit ends, you can see a little bit of a haziness that way. And so that's what it looks like when you're done sanding with 2000 grit. And just to give you an idea of how much sandpaper I use through all the process, all these little pieces, and it's mostly the 300-ish grit to cut through the original extra epoxy you lay down. So last step is polishing and the finished product. Well guys, I just cleaned up the garage and I checked out the final result, and the repair turned out really, really good, and I'm stoked on it because I definitely didn't want to buy a new carbon fiber part, and I know my OCD was going to get the best of me. So for $30 worth of parts on Amazon and a little bit of time in the weekend, I think this repair is totally doable for anybody and really pretty awesome. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something, and if you did, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys next time. Later.